Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, pilots and wannabe pilots, non-pilots, boys and girls. It doesn't really matter where you are around the world. It is Tuesday night, the fourth Tuesday night of the month. And if that's the case, it must be Ask an Ambassador. You may notice that there are only two of us here tonight. Jamie Beckett, our esteemed host and leader of this merry band of ambassadors, has gotten himself double booked. He's actually doing a rusty pilot seminar in somewhere in Florida. Who knows where he is tonight? I have no idea, Kay.
I don't know where he is.
But you know something? We have to carry. We tried to clone him. I will tell you. You don't know this, Kay. We tried to clone him. It didn't turn out well. So one of Jamie is plenty. Trust me, one of Jamie is plenty. Anyway, so
he's watching, Pat. Be careful.
Say that again.
He's watching, so be careful.
Now I'm starting to get paranoid. They're watching us, Kay. They're watching us. Listen, just want to welcome you all here. Happy to be here for another Ask an Ambassador. We're going to have some fun tonight. I want to thank Donnie McKay. Donnie is our producer. Without him, nothing happens. He is the one that helps make the magic. He's holed up somewhere. We thought he was in Frederick, but you know what? Then I heard these strange noises. We were talking to him earlier, Kay, and I think he's in like Hobbitville or something like that. I'm not real sure. But he had little points on his ears earlier tonight when we were talking. So you never know. Donnie has secrets he doesn't seem to like to talk about. Anyway, we appreciate Donnie's time too, because this is essentially after hours for him, and so we're going to have some good times tonight. As I mentioned, my able colleague Ms. Kay Sundram out there on the left coast, coming from us live and direct from her office in San Diego, California. I'm coming to you live and direct from my office in beautiful, the Memorial section of Houston, Texas. So, and then Jamie, as we mentioned, is out there in the ether somewhere. We don't really have any idea. You know, this is our second Ask an Ambassador of 2022. I've misplaced the year there for a moment. And we thought, and this is actually Kay's idea, we thought that it would be interesting to visit our goals for 2022. It's kind of the New Year's resolution version of being a pilot and seeing what we want, what we might. Those are rented lips, by the way, and the teeth are coming loose. What we might want to accomplish for the year 2022. So. And if we have some time, when we get into it a little bit later, we might actually visit on some ideas on ways that you can stay proficient and current and more importantly, proficient if you have a limited budget. So we all have limited budgets. Nobody, I think, unless you're Bill Gates, has an unlimited budget. Or, well, I guess not even Bill Gates anymore, but Jeff Bezos probably would. Your neighbor, Kay, would have an unlimited budget for flying, and not only airplanes but rocket ships. But at any rate, so those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. But as always, we're happy to entertain any other questions that you might have. They do not have to pertain to the topic at hand. We will be happy to take a shot at answering anything. If we don't know the answer, as I've said before, we'll make something up, at least to buy some time until we can find a real question for you. So contact us at ambassadors@aopa.org. That's ambassadors, plural, at aopa.org, and we'll be happy to answer things. If there's something that is interesting enough, we'll interrupt what we're doing, and we'll certainly answer those questions for you. Robert Harrison is saying he's cured of paranoia in Oregon. Well, whatever you've got, send it this way, Robert, and that'll help us out right here, because somebody's looking over my shoulder. I just know it. All right, so let's see here. Okay. Let's start out with our goals, and let's get a conversation going here. Let's start out with our goals for 2022. As most of our viewers probably know, you are an aeronautical engineer, and I suspect that you have a much more methodical way of approaching goal setting than most of us just mere mortals who don't design airplanes. Would I be correct in that assumption?
I do set goals. Yes, I set personal goals and professional goals.
Why am I not surprised? So when we were talking earlier, though, you mentioned an acronym, and I have to mention that as a non-engineer, I really hadn't heard of this one before, and you were surprised at that because you see apparently it's quite common in your line of work. So you want to kind of explain what that acronym is and maybe just how it
Yeah,
works?
absolutely. So the acronym is SMART. All right, just S.M.A.R.T. And so this is not necessarily for engineering. I've seen it in several different industries, and a lot of companies want to help their employees set meaningful goals. And this acronym, so the first one is specific. So your goal should be very clear and specific. Otherwise, you won't be able to focus on your efforts. So basically what we're saying is, what is it that you want to accomplish? Why is the goal important, and who's involved? Where is it located? Just very be very detailed. So that's the S. And if we go back to the list there, so the next one is M for measurable. So you don't want to set a goal that something like, hey, I just want to lose weight. Well, how much weight do you want to lose? You want to be real specific. So attach some sort of metric to it, or how many, or how will I know when this is accomplished? So that's the M. Then the A is that goal should be achievable. How can I accomplish this goal, and how realistic is this goal based on constraints that you have, and it might be a financial constraint. The R is, sometimes people think is achievable and realistic are the same thing, but they're not. Um, so relevant or realistic is it worthwhile? Is the timing right? Maybe it's achievable, but it's not realistic because the time's not correct. And then the last one is T for timely or time bound. You got to set some sort of deadline. Like, when are you going to do this? Are you going to do this 6 months from now, or 6 weeks, or 6 days? Or are you going to do it today? So when we set SMART goals with these specific measures, we're more likely to achieve them. So don't set that goal. I just want to lose weight. Well, I think a lot of us use that for New Year's resolutions, right? Be really specific. I want to lose X amount of weight in X amount of time doing this. Real specific.
Yeah. One of mine is I want to get some more exercise, but looking at this, that's not a realistic enough goal. It should be, I'm going to get on the bike and I'm going to ride once around the big block. Our neighborhood is about a mile and a half. At least once a day, every third day or
Yes.
something along those lines. So,
Right.
geez, Kay, you just see.
Then
You
you
just
can always
solved
be
my
more
problem.
accountable. Now,
Yeah.
you may not get all of the you can set these goals and you may not achieve all of them. That's okay.
Yeah.
But you're more likely to achieve them if you think about it. And this isn't just New Year's resolutions that you just pay attention to in January. You should revisit these because this is sort of a living thing. You're going to want to update it. And I like to set specific goals for flying because it's a whole different it's a different feel from personal goals and business goals. And plus, if you're watching this, you probably love aviation and space and flying. And so I hope some of the suggestions that we give you will be worthwhile. And by knowing some of Pat, your goals and my goals, and feel free to copy those.
Yeah. There's I read somewhere or heard somewhere, and I can't. I'm sure some of our viewers or listeners probably know what I'm talking about here, but I don't remember who it's attributed to. But it's something like, if you don't have a destination in mind, any road will take you there. And I think that's probably just a different way of thinking about the same thing that you just mentioned with regard to the SMART acronym.
Mhm.
You need to have I think it might have been Stephen Covey that said something about start with the start with the end in mind, or something. Begin with the end
Right.
in mind.
Yeah.
I think it's something along those lines. And there are a lot of smart people out there that know a lot about goal setting, and so I like where you're going with that. One of our viewers, Jamie, I'm sorry, Adam, I'm not even going to try the last name because I'll butcher it. Says, my goal is to finish up my instrument that I've been working on for 9 years and go get my commercial at the same time. See if I can stop wrenching on them long enough to fly more. Adam, I think that is an awesome goal. We need more CFIs, especially CFIs who know the mechanics behind an airplane and can take a cowling off and show their students what magnetos look like and what an alternator looks like, and all those things that most of us don't necessarily get a chance to look at on a daily basis. So I think that's a great goal. So I mean, if you ever have any questions on any of that stuff, please, not the mechanical stuff, but on your CFI goals or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out to ambassadors@aopa.org, because we'll be more than happy to help you. All of us are CFIs, and we've all been in your shoes. Kay, you had some very specific goals that we were talking about earlier before we went live here. You want to share some of those with us? Let's talk a little bit about that, dissect some of that.
Sure. Yeah, my first goal, this is my personal goal for this year, is to complete an IPC in the cirrus every 6 months, and it's specific, right? And it has all of those elements of that S.M.A.R.T acronym, and I specifically said the cirrus because I'm still kind of a new. I have crossed that 100-hour mark in the cirrus now, but compared to the 172 other airplanes that I have a lot more time in, I'm more likely to get rusty in this airplane. So that's why I want to do the IPC in a cirrus. And there's a lot more automation for me. I just need to do the IPC in this airplane more often than I do in a Cessna or a Piper. So that's one of my very specific ones. And note that I put in 6 months. It's not required. So these goals are not necessarily tied to regulatory requirements. Your goals should be for you. Of course, they should meet the regulatory requirements, but this was one of my big ones. And I'm pleased to say that I did do that just a little more than a week ago. And I will do the next one in July, probably.
Yeah, the IPC is an important thing. Obviously, keeps you safe in the airplane. I've got probably 1,100 hours in cirrus. I own two of them, actually. I recently sold my share of the cirrus that I've been flying for the last 6 years, and bought a 182. There were a lot of reasons for that. I won't go into all the reasons, but even switching from an airplane that is technically advanced like the cirrus. Now, my 182 is considered technically advanced because of the avionics that I have in it, but it's still a 182. But I looked at the amount of time I've got in that specific 182 in the last since I bought it in August. So what's not 6 months ish, 5 months, something like that. And I've got about 35, maybe 40 hours in that airplane. And I'm just now kind of getting to the point where I can put my hands back on where everything is. I've owned two 182s before, and probably have a couple of thousand hours in those airplanes as well. But there's that muscle memory, and then you throw new avionics on top of that, and I don't care how many hours you've got of actual or hood time or whatever. If you throw new avionics into the mix, boy, you got your hands full, even with something as docile as a 182. It's a
buttonology. It can really,
it can kill you just as quickly.
And the airplane is the worst place to figure out what these buttons do. And it's always going to happen at the most inopportune time, too.
Exactly. When ATC is squawking in your ear and the autopilot just kicked off because it's turbulent or something along those lines.
Right.
My old friend Ted McDavitt just chimed in here. I'm with Adam. My goal is to finish my instrument rating as well. Ted, I've known you for 10 years, and that has been your goal. But you know something? I know you're working on it with my buddy Paul, and I have confidence that you're going to finish it and that you're going to do it in way less than in the next coming 12 months. I have no question about it. Ted's a really good pilot with 3 adorable kids. So, okay, you mentioned the IPC, and AOPA has introduced a while back, a couple of years ago, I think, the idea of a focused flight review, and the instrument proficiency is a part of one of those models, right?
Correct. In fact, my second goal is revolving around the focused flight review, and it's to complete an AOPA focused flight review every 6 months with a CFI, a different CFI every 12 months. And we put that website up there because if you're not familiar with this program called Focus Flight Review, you have got to check out that website. So there are 8 different focus flight reviews that you can do. You can see those thumbnails there. For example, the takeoffs and landings, and this is not something that you just do once or twice. You can do this as many times as you want. And as I said, I like to complete a flight review, every 6 months, and I'll change it up. Now, I haven't done all of these because I'm not a helicopter pilot. I'm not a seaplane pilot yet, but I have done some of these other ones, and I think they're wonderful. And what I like about this is that it does go into a lot more detail than what you might find in a typical flight review when you are prepping for it. And take a look at the quick links up at the top right. There's actually a checklist that you can print out. There's lots of sections on what you can do on the ground on your own time. Your CFI will see what you've done before you even meet with him or her. And then you can print out a knee board checklist for the flight and focus on some of these items. So, I mean, AOPA, we've done just a fantastic job with this focus flight review, and it's all online. And then you can print them out. And in preparation for today, I went back and pulled out one of my ones that I did a couple of years ago. And this is the takeoff and landings because I've done this one, I think, 3 or 4 times. And this is the knee board that you can see the checklists. And then on the back, there's actually the sign off for the instructor. And so the instructor has one version of this, you have one, and it goes through a bunch of items for departure, airwork, arrival, all focused on takeoffs and landings. And that was one of those 8 different options. So it's really organized. Plus that quick links at the top right will show you a whole bunch of other websites and ASI, Air Safety Institute videos that you can watch and downloadable resources. It's like one-stop shopping, and it's just for flight reviews, and it's free.
Yeah, so. Yes, it's free. That's the big F word. It's free. It's a good F word. The good F word is free. You mentioned that you can repeat it as often as you want, and that's very true. And I think it's an important function of the Focus Flight Review. It's very similar to the Wings program in the sense that you can start with the basic level of Wings and simply repeat the basic level over and over and over again as much as you want. As long as you complete a phase of Wings, that will suffice as a flight review. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move through here. I think there's some of the other things that are available on the Focus Flight Review, Kay, I think are weather and controlled flight into terrain. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
That is a separate module by itself. It's an excellent one. And again, there the related links are going to be different. They're going to be more focused on weather resource, planning and understanding some of the tools that are out there, the services that are available in flight, weather equipment. So I just can't say enough about these focus flight reviews. I haven't done all the modules, but the ones that I have done, which are 5 of the 8, are just fantastic.
Right. Well, there are several, as you mentioned. There are 8 of them. One of them is positive aircraft control, which is exactly what you would expect it to be from the name. Another one is weather and controlled flight into terrain. And unfortunately, if you even though we're doing reasonably well with aviation safety in our little niche of aviation, we still keep having VFR into IMC and killing ourselves in the same ways that we've done for years and years and years. So, having a module on weather and controlled flight to terrain, I think is excellent. There's another good one on fuel, engine, and other systems. As you mentioned, instrument proficiency, takeoffs, landings, and go-arounds. The one you said that you'd been doing for, I don't know, 2 or 3 times that you've done those, and and it's great to practice that kind of stuff. Most of us do normal takeoffs and landings most of the time, but we rarely do short field takeoffs or soft field takeoffs or any of those, or even seek out some strong crosswinds. and test the the limits of our abilities with an instructor, and of course not exceeding the demonstrated crosswind component of your airplane, because now you're exceeding limitations, and that's a problem if you should hurt somebody.
And when you do
Especially if you
these
should hurt
flight reviews, you want to go to the smaller airports.
Yeah,
Go when there is a crosswind. Go looking for that.
that's
Or if
exactly
it's
right.
the IPC that you're doing, that's the time to practice a challenging circle to land.
That's right.
And then
Or
you
or a
move to
DME arc or something like
yeah.
that. Something that we really rarely ever do. There's also a session on mountain and backcountry flying if you're interested in that. And seaplanes, of course, you mentioned. I know that's one of your goals is to get your seaplane rating.
Well, it's going to have to be another year because I have a number of other goals for this year. But yes, it is on my bucket list.
And helicopters as well. Helicopters is not on my bucket list. I've flown. I have a grand total of 20 minutes in a Robinson 22, and I just find that just to be terribly unnatural. So, and I don't mean any offense to any rotor wing people that might happen to be watching here, but any aircraft that has a Jesus bolt is the primary fail safe, I don't want any part of. So anyway, I'm just kidding. I really am just kidding. It was
But a lot of utility in helicopters, though.
Yeah, I got you. I get it. What are some of your others, Kay? You mentioned just owning a Cirrus.
Right. So my I think it's goal number 3, right, is to return to Cirrus pilot proficiency program at least once a year. So I purchased a Cirrus last was it last February, and my goal last year was to just get familiar with that airplane and to do a basic transition course, an advanced transition course. And then I went to this wonderful 3-day program that COPA, Cirrus Owners and Pilots Association, offers. And pretty much every manufacturer has a group. And I encourage you to join that group, because those are like-minded folks who are either aircraft owners or they fly that particular make of airplanes or helicopters, whatever it is that you're flying. And so join those trade organizations, because you'll learn a lot from those folks. And so for me now, it's this, they call it CPPP, is something that I want to do once a year, where we really focus on the nitty gritty details of, in my case, it's the SR-20, and the equipment that is on board, and then you can go and fly with an instructor. And so this, to me, is something that I budget for. And I think we're gonna be talking about that later, right? And so I do budget for this in terms of money and time, because both of those are precious commodities, right? So that's one of my goals for this year too, is to attend at least. Well, I would love to attend all 4. They have it on a quarterly basis, but I know that that's not realistic. The R and SMART goals, I just know from a time perspective, I won't be able to do it quarterly.
Yeah, you mentioned the SR-20. Refresh my memory. Do you have the Avidyne or the Perspective?
The perspective.
Way different than the Avidyne.
Correct.
My Cirrus had the Avidyne suite, and I got to the point where I was very, very, very comfortable with that. But whenever I would have to fly, because I was a CSIP for several years, whenever I would have to fly Perspective, I would always have to hit the books for a little bit just to make sure that, because the buttonology was entirely different to do the very same thing. It was entirely a different thing. You mentioned, I think, in one of our conversations about the TCI and CSIP training as well as part of what you want to accomplish this year. Am I right?
Right. And those are my last 2 goals, but they are the biggest of the 5 goals. So I want to complete the Cirrus Training Center instructor training. They call it TCI training. And just look how I worded this goal. It's very specific, right? And in SoCal in Q1. And so I'm hoping to finish it next month. And so this is basically a stepping stone to my next and final goal, which is the CSIP. But you need to do this first because they're very specific goals. And so when you become a CSIP, Cirrus Standardized Instructor Pilot, then you've gone through the Cirrus factory specific training. Now, I can, as a CFI, I can go ahead and teach. I have enough right seat time. It's totally legal. But this is something that I am rewarding myself. I want this extra, all these bells and whistles and this training. And do really good at it. Now they have some very specific requirements to become a CSEP, and I have not met those requirements yet. And so I needed to be realistic on, well, how, what's the time frame on this? And I believe I can get it done in August, and I'm going to try. And if I don't, it's okay. I mean, I know AOPA is still going to keep me on board. This has nothing to do with my business goals or personal goals, but this is one of my flying goals, and it's a big one for me because I love teaching. And now I'm just going to continue to teach in Cessnas and Pipers, but this is a different ballgame because it's a different aircraft, different instrumentation, and so I want to be trained in it.
Well, I think that brings up, it's I guess kind of tangential a bit, but when you're seeking out training in a particular airplane, if it's possible to find someone that has time in that airplane, and I know this sounds obvious, but oftentimes it's not the case. A CFI might think, well, how different can a Cirrus be from? It doesn't matter. Name another airplane. How different can a Lance Air be from an Arrow? Well, how different can a Comanche be from an A36 Bonanza? Well, they're different. And yes, I mean, this is up and that's down and that's left and that's right. I mean, that, with the appropriate rudder and all that, I mean, that is true. But, with regard to the Cirrus specifically, there are some nuances to that airplane that you really want someone who has had some background in training in how to teach in that airplane, who understands it. This is all electric, for example, and you may not be used to using flying an airplane that has two alternators and understanding the two electrical buses and the essential bus and what you can use when alternator 1 is down versus alternator 2, and is the airplane legally airworthy depending on which alternator is out. And you know what I'm talking about, Kay, because you've gone through that transition training. And if you didn't have a CFI who knew how to guide you through all of this, and a good training program like Cirrus puts out, they really do put out a first-rate training program. You can see I'd be very easy to just, okay, well, I've figured out how to light the fires and kick the tires. Here, let's go. And then, oops, something happens, and it's not a good place to find that out when you're, at 5,000 feet or something, and things go south, and you haven't had the appropriate training. And the instructor next to you says, I wonder why it did that. And that's not a comforting feeling either, is it?
Right. Well, you bring up a good point. There's a difference between just getting a checkout and then really diving into it. And so you can get a checkout in maybe 5 hours, 8 hours. It's not that big of a deal. That transition training can be done quickly, but that is a license to learn, right?
Yes.
But that's just the beginning. And so no matter what airplane you're transitioning from, now, if I'm going to go and I did want to do some aerobatics again. It's been a while since I've done emergency maneuvers training. That was one of my goals from several years ago, and I accomplished that. There were different modules, but that was, again, probably a decade ago. And so I would love to do that, but I know that's not realistic. I'm not going to get it done this year. But when I do that and I go into a decathlon or something, I'm going to have to brush my skills on, tailwheel airplanes, and because I haven't been in one for a while. So no matter what you're transitioning to, it doesn't matter whether it's this airplane or that airplane. It's different, and that's the point.
No, that's right. In fact, you mentioned tailwheel, which is it was almost like we rehearsed this because there was a few questions earlier that Antonio, I think, asked, and he said something about maintaining currency or getting a tailwheel endorsement. I don't remember the exact question, I'm sorry, but it had to do with tailwheel. And in terms of staying current and proficient, you can certainly add adding an endorsement or a rating. We haven't really touched on additional ratings or endorsements or things like that per se. We've talked about an airplane that you own and will own for some years to come, and airplanes that I've owned. But certainly looking at a tailwheel endorsement, if you've never flown a tailwheel before, it will surprise you the first time that it tries to swap ends, because it wants to go tailwheel first, and you don't want it to do that because that's not the way they were intended to be flown. So, those things that are on the floor those are not footrests. Those are called rudder pedals. and they're there for a reason. And if you learn how to fly gliders or tailwheel airplanes in particular, you'll learn very, very quickly that those rudder pedals are down there for a reason and not just some place to comfortably rest your feet. So yeah, I would wholeheartedly say go get a tailwheel endorsement, go get your seaplane rating, do something like that if you really want to continue to fly and improve your safety and your proficiency and maintain currency in along the way. You're certainly maintaining currency because you're getting a bunch of takeoffs and landings, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I was looking at my goals as we were talking, and mine are not. I would say mine are not as training oriented as you are, but that makes sense because you just bought a new airplane that is really dramatically new to you, even though you've had some serious time. And Adam chimes in, get glider time will make you so much better as a pilot. And he is absolutely right, because you'll really understand what the weather is doing to you and what the elements are doing to you when you're a glider pilot. But mine are more from a travel perspective. I've been going to Oshkosh and to Sun and Fun for a number of years now, and I've been able to fly my own airplane or a partnership airplane every time I've gone to both events, and with minor issues in terms of weather delays or something like that. So frankly, I'm looking forward to Sun and Fun in April. I think it's the second week in April this year. I've got it on my calendar and fully intend to go down there at least for a couple of days. I've been there every year for many, many, many years. So really a couple of days is plenty to walk around and see the sights and say hello to some of the exhibitors that I've come to know over the years. Partly as just a part of the relationship with AOPA. That opens a lot of doors when you walk into an exhibitor booth and engage in conversations with some folks. It's really terrific. And it's the same thing in September of this year. We have a wedding to attend in Denver, and I've flown to Denver in my Cirrus a number of times. And our hope is to be able to take a little bit of extra time off in the beginning and in the end of that wedding period to fly up to Denver. I really, really don't want to spend any time with 300 of my closest friends in an aluminum tube at 5 miles up in the sky at 525 miles an hour. I just don't want to do it. But I'll buy some backup tickets just in case. But we'll go up there. And Kay, the old adage, time to spare, go by air. And that's the way I look at it. I never take off on a trip with the idea that I must be there on a specific day, or that I must be back on a specific day, because that's the genesis of get homeitis or get there-itis, and that's how people get hurt. So we'll leave plenty of time on the front end and the behind end of the trip, and hopefully be able to make that trip to Denver. That would be a lot of fun to make. I want to go back to Oshkosh.
When you go on some of these trips, well, I know you go on a lot of trips. Do you like to change the airplane that you fly just for variety, or do you like to stick with the one that you own?
It's hard for me to be monogamous when it comes to airplanes, Kay. I'm sorry. Some of the viewers that have been with us for a while know this, but I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of friends who like a lot of different kind of airplanes. And I've got a multi-way partnership, a small portion of a decathlon. And I love that airplane. It's so much fun to go up and turn it upside down once in a while. I'm not an aerobatic champ by any stretch of the imagination. A few loops, a few rolls, a couple of spins, I'm pretty much done. But that's enough to scratch that itch, and then come back and try to nail a wheel landing. That's my goal when I'm flying a tailwheel airplane, is I want to nail that wheel landing, because that takes a little extra skill. And I've got a multi-way partnership in a Comanche as well. I love that airplane. It's a 260C model. For those of you that have watched before, there's standing joke about the Comanche, but nonetheless, I'll fly that airplane until I can't fly anymore. And then I got rid of the Cirrus a while back, and my wife and I bought a Cessna 182 for our own personal use. And the reason that we bought that, among others, was that as much as I love my partners, and they're all awesome partners, we just didn't want to have an airplane that we had to have back because a partner had it for a trip or something like that. We didn't want to be constrained by having to be back by a certain day because the partner wanted an airplane. So we found this 182 that frankly was owned by my avionics guy. So it's got all the whiz-bang avionics in it that I could possibly ask for. Still learning how to use them. Talk about ongoing training. But that's the one we'll more than likely take up to Colorado. But no, I like to fly various airplanes. My favorite airplane is always the one I'm in. But as a CFI, and I'm sure you've had the same experience as a CFI, oftentimes we get a chance to fly all kinds of different airplanes. I mean, I've got time in Malibus and matrices, I guess is the plural of that. A whole bunch of different Cirruses, Arrows, Bonanzas, a variety of multis, from Travel Air to Bonanza to Aztec, Geronimos, and some other weird ones. And then the usual 172s, 182s, all the Piper products. I've got Lance Airtime. I've got a bunch of RV time. But all of that stuff came over many, many, many years. I don't know how many different types of airplanes I've got hours in. Over 52 years of flying. I can't believe I actually say that number without choking, but yeah, so that was a very long answer to your question, but my favorite airplane is the one I'm in. But I got to tell you, I really love that 182. It does everything well. It's not real fast. It cruises out about 135, and that's all you're going to get all day long. But it's comfortable. It's inexpensive to maintain. It's easy on gas, about 13 gallons an hour or so, and it's just a great airplane.
You're planning to take it to Oshkosh too, right? Isn't that one of your goals?
Yeah. I want to go to Oshkosh. We just rented the house in Oshkosh. We took care of that the other day. We just got to send in the deposit or the payment on the house. So the house is arranged. My partner's going to arrange a car. So yeah, all that's done. My wife and I have been talking about flying to the Bahamas. We were going to do that about 3 years ago, and the weather that week that we were going to be gone was forecast to be cloudy and stormy. And so I don't want to go to the Bahamas in that. And so we canceled that. Then Corona hit, and so that was kind of all that's been put on the back burner. And another place I'd like to fly, and this is to go back to, although I've flown there commercially with another mission in mind, a business travel prior to joining AOPA, is to Dayton, Ohio. For those of you that are listening, if you haven't ever seen the Air Force Museum at Dayton, Ohio, oh my goodness. You are missing a treat. That and the Udvar Hazy Museum up in Dulles, those are just stellar.
It's a great museum. That's a must-see.
Yeah, but I would love to fly back to Dayton, and some of my pilot buddies and I are talking about doing that sometime before the end of this year. We haven't put a date on it yet, so we haven't done the whatever acronym letter goes along with putting a date on it. We haven't done that yet. But that's a real bucket list item for me. The one big bucket list item that I had, and I think we talked about this in previous ambassador things, is to fly back to the airport where I soloed. And I've done that twice in the last 5 years, both of them in relation to a high school class reunion, or 2 class reunions, and flew back into my home airport. And it was so cool to be able to taxi into that hangar in FBO that I started flying in 1969. I mean, that was a long, long time ago, and how little that airport, it's a very small town, how little that airport has changed in that World War II era hangar that's still, with the arched, the arched top that like so many of them had back in that period of time, is still there. And it just kind of, you get a little emotional thinking about it, because it's very, very cool. So, there's a couple of folks here that are chiming in about V-tail Bonanzas. Yes, the good old V-tail Bonanza. And that's a great airplane. Those airplanes are kind of interesting because of the magnesium material that they use in the tail. Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with that as an aircraft engineer. And I think it had something to do with the weight and balance of aircraft grade aluminum. So they had to go to magnesium, and now magnesium is getting difficult to find. So if you damage your V tail, boy oh boy, you may have some problems finding material to fix it. I'm not an expert in that field, but that's what I hear from some of my friends that are. Have you heard the same thing, Kay?
I do not know about that.
Yeah, yeah, they're magnesium, and so if they get corroded or you can't stop the corrosion, there's some issues there. So any of you that are out there listening that are thinking about buying a V-tail Bonanza, just make sure to double check for any kind of damage history. Make sure that you do a careful pre-buy, especially on the V-tail portion for ADs that were done years and years ago to strengthen the spars, and also for any kind of corrosion. So yeah. And Adam chimes in. Yeah, they're getting hard to find, and good ones are getting hard to find. You can find bad ones all over the place. So anyway, let's switch gears a little bit here, Kay. Now, we talked a little bit about budgets, and I suspect there's not probably too many of our viewers out there that have an unlimited budget for flying. I certainly don't, and I know you don't either. We've talked about that. I got a lot of friends that struggle, as I'm sure you do, to fly 30, maybe 40 hours a year, and consider themselves lucky if they're able to fly 30 to 40 hours a year. They worry about being able to stay not only legally current, but probably more important, actually proficient. And I want to talk about a few ways that people can stay current and proficient when there's only so much money that they can allocate to flying. And I'll bet you got some thoughts on that.
I do. I encourage a lot of my students and just pilots in general when I'm teaching at a seminar, or just talking to my pilot buddies about this concept of chair flying, and I bring it up at every seminar that I teach. To keep chair. If the real flying is the best, but if you can't do that, because not all of us can fly every day, or even every week, or even every month, and so when you can't do that, the next best thing is to do your best to kind of visualize the procedures. And so chair flying, it's free, right? We love that word free. It's basically a training tool where you're sitting in your chair and you're visualizing in your head the aircraft, whether it's a maneuver, a procedure, a checklist item, whatever the task is, and you're going through it in real time. So you're pulling out your actual checklist and you're pretending like you're sitting in the airplane. Ideally, you would actually be sitting inside the airplane, nothing spinning, but you'll be sitting there and you'll be talking through as if you're about to go and launch off. And when you do this, then you don't become rusty as quickly. And it works. I guarantee you it works. If you sit there and you go through your checklist, your POH, you go through your emergencies, and you're visualizing things, you're more likely to retain it. It's absolutely a fact, and a lot of CFIs, we utilize this. It's a training technique, and it saves you a ton of money. And I just went through this last year, and I'm going through this right now with this airplane that has a lot of new systems and automation. It is a very, very capable airplane, and the buttonology, and I have saved a ton of money by sitting in the plane by myself going through that. And you can connect ground power. That's ideal. You don't want to run it off the battery the whole time. And so connect the ground power and then turn on all the avionics and start playing with the equipment. The more sophisticated the avionics is, the more valuable that chair flying is. But even for a 152, just basic 6-pack, you could still go through and visualize all the maneuvers. So I will, and some people might argue with me like, oh, okay, that's a waste of time. You're going to just sit there and talk to yourself and read through. Yes, I am. And it does work. I've done it myself. So, and just recently, and I'm doing it right now for my, TCI CSUB training. And when we're able to visualize that on the ground, then when we go up and fly it, it is so much easier.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for muscle memory.
Yes.
And one of the ways that you can develop that muscle memory is to do exactly what you said, Kay, especially if you can do it in the cockpit of the airplane. Next best thing, get a poster of the instrument panel. I know you have a copy of that yourself.
Yes.
A number of our young friends here in Houston that are now going to the airlines, they're moving on from the flight instructor ranks into the airlines, are telling me that part of what their training is literally to sit in a chair as if you're in the cockpit, looking at a wall that has a poster of the cockpit layout, and learning that this button does that and this button does that, and reach out and touch that and reach out and touch this. And so, one of the things that I like to have when I was teaching a lot actively, I still do, but not as much as I used to, is to tell my students or ask my students, close your eyes and touch the flap handle. And if they could close their eyes and reach over there and touch the flap handle, assuming it was in a Cessna, then that's good. Okay, reach up and touch the frequency knob on the radio. Don't look at it. Look at the airspeed indicator, or look at the turn and bank indicator, and reach up here and touch the knob to switch frequencies. Not just any knob, but the big knob to switch the frequencies or what have you. Reach up there to the audio panel and touch the switch that monitors COM2. Those kind of exercises. Even just where's the mags? Reach down there and find the mags. Where's the primer? If you have an airplane with a primer, with an old manual type primer, those kinds of exercises really they can make the difference between a successful and unsuccessful outcome in an emergency. If you can automatically reach for something and put your hand on it, or if you just know instinctively where you're going to reach for something. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And think about night flying, right?
Yeah.
And so everything is harder to see, right? You're not going to just lighten up the inside of the cockpit, because then you're going to lose your night vision.
Yeah.
So everything is harder to see to begin with, but you should know, all right, well, this is bat 2, bat 1, alt 2, not the other way around. You need to know the order of that. And so you got to kind of memorize where all the buttons are. And that helps you not just in night flying and situations like that, but it'll allow you to get to where you need to go very quickly if you can memorize, okay, this button is here, this is there.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What else do you think? You got some other ideas?
Yeah. So in addition to the chair flying, I recommend that people actually sit as a passenger and observe what other pilots are doing. So if you're in a flight school or flying club and you're a student pilot, or particularly if you're an instrument candidate, then sit there and observe, but pretend like you are the pilot. So let's just use an example of you're in your instrument rating, and go with your buddy and then take turns and then reciprocate that favor, and watch what they are doing on that instrument approach, but have your information at your lap as if you're flying. And when you hear the controller say, do this and this and this, actually move your hand, even though you're sitting in the back seat. That will save you a ton of money. Again, it's better than chair flying, because you're actually in the airplane and you're seeing things. Or even if you're an IMC, you're still seeing what's going on in the cockpit. And so that saves a ton of money if you can visualize it while somebody else is actually flying the airplane. Then you can actually think about, okay, well, what just happened here? Or if it didn't make sense, jot it down and then ask the instructor when you get back. And if you're not in the training mode and you're just going for $100 hamburger, take advantage of when you're the passenger. And this is how we prevent becoming rusty. And it's also how we can keep our proficiency on a budget.
Yeah, you talk about acting when you're the passenger going for $100 hamburger, for example. Maybe if you split up the duties, for example, the person in the left seat's doing the flying, but the person in the right seat's doing the radio communications. Right. That's one way to keep your radio chops sharp, especially if you're dealing with a towered field and you don't have a chance oftentimes to talk to the control tower. It's just tell your buddy in the left seat, look, I want to handle the radio, and do that. That's there's no cost to that beyond probably buying lunch for your buddy. So I think that's another good thing that you can do here. You had also mentioned scheduling multiple lessons, didn't you, Kay? I don't
I
remember.
did. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of I recommend that you book the lessons ahead of time and you treat it like a doctor's appointment, right? You commit to it. Now, when students work with me, like I will carve that time off and I will be there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm committed to it. And I ask that the student do the same thing for two reasons. One, I respect their time and I want them to respect mine. But the bigger reason is that I want them to be committed and stick to it because they're more likely to reach their SMART goals if they actually schedule it. And if you treat it like a doctor's appointment, then it will happen.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there's always some prep work, or you can call it homework if you want, but it's really just to help you be more proficient during the lesson. But if you can't get it done, it's okay. Don't cancel the appointment just because you didn't get the lesson done. Still proceed, and a good instructor will understand that and will say, okay, well, we'll cover some of this stuff now, we'll add it to the next lesson, and they'll work around it. But don't cancel it. I'll admit I've done that before, and it's a mistake when you want everything to. It's that perfectionist is a double-edged sword, right? You want to do the best you can, but you also don't. You don't need to be perfect. If you don't get it done, it's okay. Just go for the lesson. Just schedule it like a doctor's appointment, and then don't bail out, even if you don't get to feel like you're ready for the lesson. Go anyway.
Well,
Uh,
and let me add a caveat to that. A good instructor will understand that up to a point. If
that's true. That's true.
it's a chronic situation where you're coming in unprepared, and this applies probably more to students, depending on, well, really, no matter what you're studying, private, institutional, commercial, whatever. It applies really more to students, but it also applies to people who are just going for additional training or IPC or whatever. The instructor expects you to come in prepared.
Right.
If the instructor has done his or her job, you'll know what you should have been studying to lead up to the IPC or the flight review or the turns about a point or whatever you're going to do. And Kay makes a good point about perfection. Perfection has never been the standard. If you look at the ACS, nowhere in the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, or the PTS, and where that still exists, nowhere does it say perfection is the standard. We can never attain perfection. What we can absolutely attain, though, is consistency. So if
Mhm.
the traffic pattern is 1,000 feet AGL, the traffic patterns are 1,000 feet AGL. We don't settle for 850. Let's see, Brander Espinal just chimed in. I think this is excellent. We've heard it before. Perfect is the enemy of good. And
Right.
Jennifer, right below that, says treat it like a job. And they're both right. We'll never be perfect, but we can achieve consistency. And what I used to tell my students, and again, I still do, when although I don't take on primary students or anyone working from scratch to the end of a rating anymore. I just don't have the time. But when I did, I always encouraged them to schedule at least 2 lessons a week, 3 if they could. If they schedule 3, they would probably fly twice, and because you're going to have weather delays. And if they only schedule 2, be thankful if you could fly 1, but chances are that one's going to get canceled because of maintenance issues or weather or who knows what. So the more frequently you can fly over the course of the week, the less it's going to cost you, whatever training you're doing, whether it's for a rating or a certificate, or whether it's just to get your IPC nailed down. The more often you can fly in proximity to the previous lesson, the less money it's going to cost, and the quicker you're going to be able to do it in a lesser number of hours, which of course equates into cost. So those I think just are really important things. You had mentioned, I think you had mentioned budgeting too, Kay. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Real quick. I know we're running out of time here, but give yourself a budget for flying. It's absolutely important that we set aside our some time and money to to achieve these flying smart goals. And I like to actually think of a number and say, okay, I'm going to allocate this amount for myself. And I think of it as sort of my fun money, because flying to me is something that I really enjoy. But
Yeah.
I find it hard to sometimes squeeze in the time to go to that CPPP. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to make it to the next one if I'm going to have the time. But time and money, set that aside, and then you're more likely to achieve those smart flying goals.
Yeah.
But you got to be mindful about it. You have to be intentional.
Yeah.
Intentional is absolutely is essential to get these things accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I only have a couple. One is to have a mission for every flight. And it's probably just a slightly different way of saying some of the things that you are already said, Kay, but have a mission for each flight. As an example, when I go fly the decathlon, my mission is to make sure that my wheel landing skills don't diminish. So I make a point of doing at least 2 or 3 landings. No matter what I've done at decathlon, I'll make a point of doing 2 or 3 landings before I put it up. There will be at least a slip on one. One will be a wheel landing, and one I'll pull the power beam, the numbers, and attempt to do 180-degree accuracy landing, as you have to do for your commercial certificate. And that's my goal every single time that I fly the decathlon, because I want to make sure that I can keep those tailwheel chops up, and those things help me to do that. If you're a private pilot, every now and then, just every once in a while, do a steep turn. That's the goal today. Is we're going to go out and get $100 hamburger. I've got another pilot in the airplane with me, so I know he or she's not going to get sick. We're going to do a steep turn to the left and a steep turn to the right on the way out to the restaurant. Oh, and at the restaurant, when we land at the airport there, we're going to do a short field landing. And if you pick some of those basic private pilot maneuvers, or commercial, if you happen to be a commercial and you want to do that, then I think that's a really good way of doing it. And if you're an instrument pilot, file IFR somewhere, even if it's a clear, blue, beautiful day outside, and file IFR and ask for an approach on both ends. Maybe you're not under the hood, maybe you are, but either way, you're pressing the buttons and you're replying to ATC in the phraseology that they expect, and so on and so forth. So there's ways that you can do that on a budget. I'm looking at the clock here, and we are about 2 minutes away from hitting the witching hour, Kay. And I don't want to forget our Stump the Ambassador question. We got an email a little earlier today, and the question was this: I'm an instrument pilot, and someone told me there are 4 requirements that need to be met for weather requirements at the alternate airport. I know about the 1, 2, 3 rule and the 602 and 802 rules. Are there other weather requirements? And Kay, since I asked the question, I'm going to ask you to answer it.
Okay, well, let me first talk about the 1, 2, 3 rule, because maybe not everybody knows what that is. And my response is not just for instrument rated pilots, even though this question is from an instrument pilot. This is for VFR pilots too. So the 1, 2, 3 rule is to help you remember when an alternate airport is not required. So 1 hour before or after your planned estimated time arrival, that's where the 1 comes from. So the 2 is you have to have 2,000-foot ceiling, and the 3 is for 3 statute mile visibility. So if you have that, then you don't have to pick an alternate. But all of you IFR and VFR pilots out there, I would always have an alternate anyway, even if you meet that 1, 2, 3 rule. So that's what that is. Then the 602, 802 rules that the pilot is talking about is, so if the weather, you're going to go pick the alternate, but then that alternate has to have, if it has a precision approach, like an ILS or something like that, it has a 600-foot ceiling and 2-mile visibility. If it's non-precision, then it's going to be higher. So it's 800 and 2-mile visibility. So that's those rules. So in addition to that, if the alternate doesn't have an approach at all, you can still list it as an alternate, as long as you can go from the MEA, the minimum en route altitude, to the airport in VFR conditions. But the other rule I think that they might be missing is that if you're planning a GPS approach at your destination, then you cannot You cannot pick a alternate with only a GPS. So it could be one, but it can't be at both. And the reason they do that is because we know that GPS systems do get jammed. And so you have to pick something else. So that would be the other one that they're missing on their list.
Yeah, and if
Is that right?
anybody, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
As they would say on James, what is it? What's the guy's name? Late night. His band leader always asks a question, and you are correct, Kay. That's exactly right.
Okay.
For anybody that's interested in digging into that any deeper, you can look at Advisory Circular 90-105A. Donnie just put that up. Thank you for that, Donnie. That's the advisory circular that talks about the GPS limitations on your alternate airport. So 90-105A, if anybody's interested. Well, folks, we have once again burned through an hour, and actually an hour, 1 minute and 15 seconds to be exact, almost an hour and 2 minutes by the time I finish with this. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all of you folks that added some comments and some questions. Hopefully we got a chance to answer or address most of them. If you have any questions for us, or if there's anything you want to try to stump us on, just email us at ambassadors@aopa.org. We'll be more than happy to get back to you. I promise you, we are real people with real emails and real ability to type. And we'll be more than happy to get back with you and answer any questions that you might have. We will be back again on the second week of, the second week of February, I guess. And thank you, Donnie, for putting that up, because I had forgotten to look and see what date the 8th of the second week of February was. Anyway, folks, thank you for joining us, Kay. It was a pleasure as always. These things are so much fun, and I'm looking forward to February the 8th. Y'all take care, stay warm if you're in Florida in particular, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Good night.